Okay, welcome back, everyone. Our next speaker, and we're very happy to have her here, we have Almut Fricke. Ms. Fricke, may I ask you to join me on the stage? Ms. Fricke has some great titles and positions. She is the head of kubia. Could you just explain what kubia is? Well, I think I'm going to talk about that in my presentation anyways, but it is the Competence Centre for Cultural Education at the Old Age and Inclusion. But as I said, I'm going to enlarge on that in a bit. In addition to that, however, Ms. Fricke is active in a field of research, namely Cultural Geragogy. This is a term that I have to say nobody on earth was able to understand. So I just tried to explain people what we are going to do today, and I was not able to explain what that term is standing for. Then she's also active in some committees and bodies with respect to cultural participation. For instance, in a committee for cultural participation, Amateo, wonderful name. But I think all of those details is something that we will be hearing in a minute, and I hope that afterwards we will have the time to ask questions before the lunch break. Thank you so much. Thanks for the invitation. I've been dealing with the issue of culture and the old age for more than 20 years, and I usually started in a European network, the Age Culture Net, and we collaborated with partners from 12 different countries. It was back in 2006, and we were the real pioneers. Nobody really knew what this topic was all about. This is why I'm all the more glad to be here today and have the opportunity to speak to you. Thank you so much, Gundula, for having me. My main focus today will be cultural Geragogy in Germany. It's a novel discipline. But before I start going in more detail, I would like to tell you a little bit about kubia, this Competence Centre for Creative Aging and Inclusion. Then something about cultural learning at an older age, and also what cultural geragogy is good for. So this is the structure of my presentation. Kubia. Kubia was established in 2008. I did that together with some colleagues of mine. And the aim of kubia is an inclusive opening of the cultural and arts scene for older people in the state of North Rhine-Westphalia. We actually started with the elderly. In the meanwhile, we are also including disabled persons because there is an intersectoral cohesion in all of these areas. Our core idea is to promote an equal participation in cultural events of people with different backgrounds. We are based in Cologne. Before that, we used to be in Remscheid in the state of North Rhine-Westphalia. However, we are responsible for this whole state, NRW, and this is because the Ministry for Culture and Science of this federal land is who is funding us. First of all, it was only the funding of one particular project, and since 2017, we are 100% funded by this institution. We are employing 7 scientific researchers and some administrative staff, and in the meantime, we have a budget of approximately 400,000 euros per year. And North Rhine-Westphalia is a rather big state. For those of you who are not from Germany, the federal states are responsible for cultural affairs, so there is no such thing as a German Ministry of Culture or for culture. We rather have 16 different ministers for cultures, and North Rhine-Westphalia is the one land with the highest number of inhabitants, and it is almost as big as the Netherlands. Our aims are to first and foremost promote the discussion about the effect of an aging society. We would like to raise awareness about those issues, and we would also like to make the cultural institutions aware that the population is aging, but also that the artists are aging. And we would also like to promote inclusion in the cultural scene, in the cultural affairs. And this is, for instance, applicable for policymakers in North Rhine-Westphalia. We also contributed to the development of regulations where we were able to also put in and bring input on our topics. We promote the cultural participation by older and disabled people, and we provide cultural education. These are our main topics, and it is part of our DNA that the qualification and professionalization of those providing arts, of arts facilitators, but also of people who are active in the care industry are promoted. Accordingly, our target groups are first and foremost artists, arts facilitators, staff of cultural institutions, local authorities, and care professionals and health care professionals. We have different fields of activity. What is very important to say is that we try to promote information and a knowledge transfer. We would like to shed a light on the diversity topics, aging and disablement. This is something that we would like to make people more aware of. 2 times a year, we are producing a magazine that you can subscribe to for free. On a regular basis, we also provide relevant information in a monthly newsletter. We are active on social media, and we really try to keep people updated about this topic. We do a lot of networking, and we also render advice regarding the access to cultural events, but also concept development and some promotional structures. We build networks between actors from people working in the care sector. We are also acting in different other networks, nationally and internationally so, and we have also contributed and participated in many European projects. What is also important is funding. We are funding 100,000 euros every year for innovative, high-quality projects of cultural education and training that are focusing on the participation of older people, of senior citizens that were prevented from taking part in that before. And on average, it is about 11 to 15 projects per year. This actually fluctuates depending on the funding means. And another important field of action is professional training. We have approximately 25 different events per year throughout North Rhine-Westphalia, daily seminars in presence, but also some online workshops, which we have offered even before the pandemic, then some specific conferences on cultural participation, or in November, something on the topic of intergenerational work, but also disablement, culture and art. This is something that we have planned for July in Düsseldorf, a big conference called All In. This is something that deals with the disablement in the theater, on stage, but also behind the scenes. And we are also offering an advanced and certified course that I will talk about in a bit. So why is it so important to continue learning at an older age? I mean, of course, there are many biases regarding the capabilities of learning at an older age. People tend to say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. This is something that is a common saying, but actually it lacks any proof for that. Quite the reverse is true. In order to be able and cope with the challenges of aging and in order to keep pace with the digital era, we have to rely on the possibility to learn throughout the whole life in order to keep up with the rest. Also in arts, this learning is possible, and you can see that not only because of the works of elderly artists of all kinds. For instance, the 89-year-old artist Fujiko Nakaya from Japan. She has great sculptures that are currently displayed in the Haus der Künste in Munich. Some studies have also proved that instrumental lessons for people with dementia have led to progress, to learning progress, meaning that cultural learning can actually take place at any given time throughout one's life. We know from neuropsychology and neuroresearch, we know that it is a stable level, that our brain disposes of high plasticity and the crystallized intelligence remains at the same level, which is thanks to the world knowledge and life experience. This is why we can actually interconnect everything that we have learned before and everything that we learn anew. The fluid intelligence, particularly the learning speed and the learning accuracy, however, is ever decreasing. This process kicks in at the age of approximately 30 years of age, so at a very early stage. So it is absolutely decisive how and what can motivate us to go on learning. So I'm interested in learning how motivated am I. This is something that has to do with everything that people learned throughout their lives. What positive or negative experiences do I have? Do I feel addressed adequately? Am I perhaps underestimated, overestimated? Do I like the others that take part in any such training? And what age groups have the people teaching? And what are the teaching institutions like? Education at an old age is a central and a key element in order to increase participation, particularly for those that are affected by different exclusion criteria. The self-expression and the cultural education at an age are actually something that coin an active and determined creation of one's own aging. And there have been several studies that are proof that cultural participation and activity have a positive impact on the health and the well-being, as well as the social cohesion and inclusion of older people. Heiner Gembris, he's a professor for talent research at the University of Paderborn, conducted an empiric study with older participants in senior orchestras, and he asked them what actually was the personal benefit for them in playing music. And they all said and confirmed that it is a higher level of well-being, it's a higher life quality, well-being, relaxation, staying fit. They feel the sense of luck and joy, social contacts, and also a feeling of belonging. Negative self-image is when you think of your own capabilities of learning something new, and the concern that you are too old to learn something new is actually much higher a hurdle than the actual losses that prevent us from learning. There is a survey called Kulturbarometer 50+. It is a representative survey from the year 2008 that was mandated by the Centre for Cultural Research on behalf of the Federal Ministry for Education and Research regarding the interest in culture and cultural events of people that are 50+ years of age, has asked different participants about their own image. And the good news here is that the results showed that the participants said the older they were, that the less they dared to take up. But still, they all believed that those capabilities could also be learned and expanded further at a later age. We've actually heard a lot about the diversities of aging. And I mean, of course, age is encompassing different generations. We have talked about this span of people who are today 50, where nobody would talk about a real old age. 20 years ago, it was an old age, when many people in Germany had to retire at an age of around 50 years of age. And I think that those calendar age descriptions are not really helpful, and they are not realistic either. And I think it is quite clear that at some point you simply feel like you belong to any such group and no longer as a teenager or a young person. This means that cultural education at an old age is just as diverse as the group of those elderly who is addressed by it. And I think it was only the day before yesterday, the European partnerships have experienced the Dance On project here in Munich with people with psychological problems, mental problems, people that were very difficult to address. There are some projects for theater stagings, for dementia patients. Then there are choirs for older participants at a very high level, even at jazz levels. Then there are some drumming projects for people of a senior living facility. So there is a whole bunch of different projects that can be offered. So the heterogeneity of the elderly actually requires many accesses and different offers regarding cultural education and training. And the tradition of such training is actually in working with children and adolescents. However, the practice has shown us that the elderly increasingly are interested in cultural education. And there was another survey in North Rhine-Westphalia showing that in this federal state alone, there are more than 80 different ensembles. There is a boom for senior choirs. The music schools are also showing increasing numbers of pupils that are 60 years plus. And also at the Volkshochschule, one of the teaching institutions, shows that for cultural and creative events, the majority of people is older than 50. And this one survey that I've talked about, Kulturbarometer 50 Plus, has found out that almost 30% of all people surveyed between the ages of 50 and 70 that have not been creative so far actually uttered an interest in the offers for cultural education. For those offering cultural education that usually work with children and adolescents, for instance, music schools, art facilitators in museums and concert venues or theaters, for freelance artists, this means that they need qualification and professionalization in order to develop high-quality offers for the elderly. And this is our actual topic of my lecture today.
Yes, that was the point of departure in 2011 for cultural pedagogy that was launched together with Professor Münster. In addition to the daily seminars offered by Kubia, we wanted to create a general continued education program. This is considered a part of cultural Geragogy. Geragogy is the science and practice of learning and educational processes at an old age. In the manual for Geragogy, Geragogy is described as being a scientific discipline that is oriented towards the guiding principle of human dignity and participation at an older age. Building processes in the second half of life are researched. Educational concepts are developed together with older people for senior citizens and tested. And we have, unlike cultural gerontology, culture is defined in broader terms as the entirety of the accomplishments achieved during a lifetime of any gender of a society, technical and artistic accomplishments, behavioral patterns in cohabitation, standards, values, etc. So it goes along all artistic disciplines. We have cultural geragogy, rhythmic geragogy, dance geragogy, art geragogy, and so on and so forth. The expression comes from the Greek and is made up of geraios, the old person, meaning old, an old person, and the word argo, which means as much as I guide, I show you the way. This expression has been prevalent in German expert circles since the 60s. And this has also been part of American research for almost as much time. And in Audiopedia, there's a small English definition of what this actually is. Cultural Geragogy deals with the necessary conceptual prerequisites and enabling conditions in educational work with older people. It combines findings from gerontology and geragogy with cultural pedagogical methods. It is understood to mean an enabling didactic that deals with the cultural engagement of older people based on their interests, experiences, and needs. Cultural Geragogy in Germany is not established as a scientific discipline, and therefore there are no chairs for this at a university. In science, cultural geragogical topics, however, are prevalent in increasing fashion in various disciplines: cultural pedagogy, social work, gerontology, sociology, psychology. And they are therefore part and parcel of education and research. The development of a master's program, however, has not occurred yet. Hans-Hermann Wickel described the goal of cultural geragogy as the development of a holistic, barrier-free and suitable, as well as qualitatively valuable offering for the various cultural needs and desires of older people, irrespective of their life conditions. Cultural, pedagogical, educational offerings are supposed to integrate individuality and diversity of aging. At the same time, they're supposed to consider the peculiarities of each phase of life during the aging process, and also provide communication and information on culture tailored to the specific age groups without distorting anything by looking at reality. And what is subliminal can definitely be a challenge. We mustn't forget that. Important stances in cultural geragogy and orientations are that you start from the life story and educational history of the participants, that you negotiate teaching content and goals in dialogue, seeing eye to eye, that you pick up on competencies and existing resources, that you consider the life environment and cultural biography and degree of socialization of the individuals, that you provide an opportunity for active participation, that you consider special conditions of learning at age, that you are familiar with the physical and cognitive limitations and their ramifications, and that you also do justice to the changed demands placed on quality with respect to cultural education by older people, while also giving them room for establishing social contacts. On this theoretical structure, we have placed another structure that has been in existence since 2011. It's a course, and in November 2022, the next course is supposed to start. It's fully booked. The waiting lists are extremely long, and we hope to be able to launch another course next year. The course takes approximately 1 year. It consists of 8 modules, starting with a weekly module, and you can do this while you're at work or while working. There are 7 further modules that take place on Fridays and Saturdays. During this time, the participants are supposed to conduct a practical project that is related to their work, and then they're supposed to write a thesis which reflects their reflections on the process. And after that, a colloquium takes place. That sounds quite sophisticated. It's just basically a conversation on the thesis. It's not a complete course of study. It's part of continued education that is related to their actual work. A completed degree from an institution of higher learning or similar practical experience are prerequisites for participating in the course. The contents of the course are quite multifaceted, starting with aging from biological, sociological, and psychological point of view, what the cultural activity during the aging process actually consists of, education and learning at an older age, and intergenerational learning, stances and orientations, dealing with restrictions and limitations as one grows older with respect to the methods. You have to look at biographies and memory work. We have the intersectionality of age and the significance of diversity, inclusion, and accessibility, cultural work with people who have dementia, how to work with people with various cultural backgrounds, and then we go down into various subjects, including basic skills such as project management, networking, public relations, how to file a request or an application, etc. The continued education occurs on an interdisciplinary basis. That's really important. It addresses people from culture and education, social work, and care. This is something that's always important to us. We want to make sure that this relationship is balanced, that we have at least an equal split between people in the cultural realm and the social realm. Personal access and experience in a discipline of art, however, are a prerequisite. So you definitely have to have a certain degree of affinity to some form of art. The findings acquired during continued education are then considered additional vocational qualification that they can draw on in their main job. They can become freelancers or entrepreneurs. Some startups have developed from this, and in other situations they are integrated in their charitable work. And what I have here is a small gallery of cultural geragogists. I'm very happy to see at least one of them here, Mrs. Petra Kellermann. She's here in the flesh. She's from Bavaria, and right now she is currently undergoing the continued education program. She has worked in Bavarian districts and has worked on summer festivals, and she has launched a freelance endeavor. And this is a wonderful program involving people with dementia working in nature. And at top left, we see Christina Rissmann, who works in a library in Hamburg, where she works with media envoys. These are people who do charitable work. They visit people who are at home because they have reduced mobility. They read to them. They conduct conversations about literature with them. They just involve them, basically. And then we have Andreas Finke, who is the director of a care facility for old people. One of his hobbies is photography, and he has established a habit of creating calendars, including the residents on various topics, such as fairy tales. He has won, you can win trips. There are photo shootings with masks and costumes. It's all really wonderful. And they also have regular rock concerts. We know that the younger generations have different cultural predilections, so that is also considered. Now I'm going to flip forward a little bit. There's an entire landscape in Germany now, which has evolved over time, encompassing continued education in the field of cultural geragogy. It all started in Münster, and before cultural geragogy, in 2004, Hans-Hermann Wickel, for the first time, developed a Center for Musical Geragogy in Münster. He's a musician. And then the University of Applied Sciences started offering courses in Rhineland-Palatinate, in Baden-Württemberg, in Bavaria, in Schleswig-Holstein, and in Thuringia. Similar offerings were launched, and several hundred participants have now undergone this course of study. There are also more specific offerings, art geragogy at the Academy of Fine Arts in Wolfenbüttel, and then there are programs involving theater with people who have dementia, which is about to be launched in Hamburg. And last but not least, perhaps I should mention one thing. In 2016, together with Theo Hartogh, a research tome was published, and we tried to ferret out what had been accomplished and what the findings had been to date in the various disciplines and fields relating to cultural geragogy and cultural engagement and participation at an older age. This brings me to an end. I hope that I have remained within my allotted time. Yep, that looks okay. Thank you so much for your attention and listening. I look very much forward to speaking with you perhaps during a break. If you have any questions, you have my email address, and we also have a newsletter. If you're interested in this topic, then you can subscribe to it with us. It contains information on news not only in relation to North Rhine-Westphalia, but also for Germany and other parts of the world. Thank you very much.